The woman who took everything from me is standing 30 feet away, holding a glass of champagne, accepting applause from a room full of people who have no idea what she did. And I am about to walk straight toward her. But before I tell you what happened that night, let me tell you what they took. Because you need to understand the full weight of it before you can understand why walking into that ballroom was the most powerful thing I have ever done in my life. They took my father's restaurant. They took my name from his legacy. They took my college fund, my future, and 15 years of credit they never earned. They told everyone I had failed. They built their entire lives on the story of my disappearance. What they forgot, what people like that always forget, is that you cannot bury someone who refuses to stay buried. My name is Maya Chen. I am 34 years old. I run Hearthstone Hospitality Group, a restaurant and hotel company operating in 11 cities. I was personally invited tonight to receive the highest honor at the National Hospitality Excellence Awards, and the woman who told me I would never amount to anything in this industry is receiving an award on the same stage. Tonight, in the same room. She doesn't know I am here. I know exactly what I am walking into. I chose to walk in anyway. My daughter Sophie tugs at my wrist as we cross the marble floor. She is 7 years old and wearing a red dress that she chose herself because, as she announced this morning with complete certainty, red is the color of important people. "Mama, there are so many forks," she whispers, wide-eyed at the glittering table settings around us. "I know, baby." I squeeze her hand. "I'll teach you which one to use." My husband James appears at my left shoulder, steady, warm, the man who has stood beside me through every chapter of this story. His hand finds the small of my back. He leans close. "You okay?" I look across the ballroom. Standing near the stage, beside the award plaques already lined up on their easels, I see her face for the first time in 15 years. Patricia Lowe, my stepmother. She hasn't aged so much as calcified. The same rigid posture, the same practiced smile she wears in rooms like this one, the smile of a woman who has convinced herself that what she built was hers. Beside her stands my stepbrother Derek, straightening his jacket the way he always does when he wants to appear more important than he is. Our eyes meet across 300 tables. Her face drains of color. She did not know I would be here. She never thought to check. Sophie looks up at me. "Mama, do you know that lady?" I take a breath. Long, quiet, measured. "I used to," I say. "Stay with me." Because what happens next, what my 7-year-old daughter says in the middle of that ballroom, is something nobody in that room will ever forget. Let me tell you about my father. David Chen opened his first restaurant when he was 26 with $11,000, 2 borrowed folding tables, and a recipe for braised short rib that his mother had carried from Hong Kong in her memory. He called it the Lantern. It seated 40 people. Within a year, there was a line outside every Friday night. I grew up inside that restaurant the way other children grow up inside houses. My earliest memories are of kitchen sounds, the percussion of cleavers, the hiss of oil, the rhythm of my father calling orders in a voice that was simultaneously commanding and warm. By the time I was 10, I could break down a whole chicken in 4 minutes. By 12, I was running the lunch prep station unsupervised. My father never called it work. He called it the family language. He married Patricia when I was 13. She had a son, Derek, who was 16 and had never once held a spatula in his life. She was beautiful and laughed at my father's jokes, and for a while I thought it might be okay. It wasn't okay. Patricia had different ideas about what the restaurant should become. Bigger, more commercial, more profitable per square foot. Less about the food, more about the turnover. My father resisted, gently, in the way gentle men resist things, by smiling and redirecting and hoping the conversation would drift elsewhere. Then he got sick. pancreatic cancer. Stage 3. He went from diagnosis to gone in 14 months, and in those 14 months, Patricia became very organized about the future. By the time my father passed, she had already had legal documents drawn up that transferred managing ownership of the Lantern and its two sister locations to herself and Derek. I was 19, I had no lawyer, I had no documents, I had a culinary school acceptance letter and my father's handwritten recipe journals, and the specific hollow grief of someone who has lost two things at once: the person and the world that person built. I tried to talk to Patricia the week after the funeral. She was at the restaurant, not cooking, not hosting, repainting the entrance, changing the color from the warm gold my father had chosen to a corporate charcoal gray, pulling his sign down from above the door. Within a year, the Lantern was gone entirely. The name, the warmth, the gold. Patricia rebranded it Low Family Bistro. Her name, not my father's. She had kept her first husband's surname even after marrying my father, never once taking his name. I always thought that said something, that she was only ever visiting our family, never joining it. Now she opened 3 more locations on the strength of the reputation my father had built before she erased him from it. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen the day I saw the new sign go up, the kitchen where I had learned everything. And I said quietly that I wanted to be involved, that this was my father's legacy, that I had been cooking here since before Derek could drive. Patricia turned around slowly. Maya. Her voice was the temperature of a commercial refrigerator. This business needs people who can make hard decisions, not sentimental ones. I think you should focus on your little cooking school. Little cooking school. She turned back to the paint samples before I could respond. Derek leaned against the counter behind her, arms crossed, wearing that particular smirk he saved for moments when he felt he had won something. He was 22 years old and had just been handed a restaurant chain he had done nothing to build. He looked completely comfortable with that. I walked out, into the parking lot, November air cutting straight through my jacket. I sat in my car for 40 minutes before I stopped shaking enough to drive. I never went back. I want to tell you that what followed was a clean story of triumph. Hard work, clear vision, rapid ascent. It was not clean. The first 2 years were the kind of difficult that nobody photographs. I worked the lunch line at a hotel restaurant in Cincinnati for $9 an hour. I slept on an air mattress in my friend Dana's spare room for 11 months because I couldn't afford both rent and culinary school tuition simultaneously. I missed meals, not because I forgot to eat, but because some weeks the math didn't work. I remember one specific Tuesday in February of year 2. It was 5:47 in the morning, and I was sitting on the floor of Dana's kitchen because the air mattress had a slow leak, and I had woken up flat on the floor anyway. I had a culinary textbook open across my knees, a highlighter in one hand, and a cup of instant coffee going cold beside me. $12 in my bank account. My shift started in 2 hours. I looked around that kitchen. Someone else's dishes, someone else's magnets on the refrigerator, someone else's life arranged neatly around me, and I made a decision so quiet it barely felt like one. I was going to build something, not to prove them wrong, not for revenge, just because staying small, staying gone, staying erased was genuinely unbearable. I opened a new page in my notebook and wrote 2 words at the top: the journal. My father's recipe books were the only things I owned that had weight. 14 notebooks, handwriting shifting between English and Cantonese depending on his exhaustion level, margins crowded with revisions and second thoughts, and little sketches of plating ideas. I had carried them out of the house in my bag the day Patricia changed the sign, and I had never let them out of my sight since. If they could take the building, I was keeping the language. I wrote to my father's former suppliers, introducing myself. Half didn't respond. A few responded with polite regrets. One man, Raymond Okafor, a produce distributor who had supplied the lantern since before I was born, wrote back in 3 lines, "Your father was one of the good ones. I remember you cutting vegetables in that kitchen when you were barely tall enough to reach the counter. Tell me what you need." Raymond became my first investor, $40,000. Enough, barely, to lease a failing sandwich counter in a strip mall in Columbus, Ohio, and convert it into a 22-seat dinner restaurant. The morning before we opened, I arrived at 5 a.m. alone. The sign above the door read, "Journal." I had painted it myself, staying up until 2 a.m. to get the letters right. I stood on the sidewalk in the dark with my key in my hand for a long moment before I could make myself put it in the lock. My hands were shaking, not from fear exactly, but from the specific weight of a moment you have been moving toward for so long that its arrival feels almost impossible. I turned the key. The door opened. I walked into my own kitchen for the first time. I stood in the center of it for 60 seconds without moving, just breathing, just letting it be real. Then I tied my apron and started prep. The Columbus food critic visited on a Tuesday night in March of year 3 and wrote 4 paragraphs that ended with, "I don't know where Maya Chen came from, but I hope she's staying." I spent 5 years building the foundation alone before James walked into it. 5 years of double shifts and supplier negotiations and conversations with Raymond about cash flow and the specific loneliness of building something nobody else can fully see yet. In year 4, I attended a culinary workforce conference in Detroit and met a young woman named Keisha Washington, 22 years old, running a tiny nonprofit kitchen training program out of a church basement with 17 participants and no funding pipeline. She had the same look I recognized from my own mirror at 19. That specific combination of fire and exhaustion that belongs to people who are building something with no safety net underneath them. I gave her Raymond's number that afternoon. I told her, "Call this man. Tell him Maya sent you. Tell him you need someone who bets on people before the numbers do." She called me back 4 days later, voice completely different, settled, like someone who had just discovered the ground beneath them was more solid than they thought. James arrived in year 5 as my sous chef, steady hands, absolutely no ego about food, which is rarer than any Michelin star. He asked me out 4 times before I said yes, and when he finally did, he took me to a noodle shop in a strip mall and said, completely seriously, that he thought the broth was transcendent. I knew then. We opened a second location 14 months after meeting, then a third, then a boutique hotel in Nashville with a restaurant attached that received a James Beard nomination in its opening year, then Chicago, then Seattle, then Boston. Hearthstone Hospitality Group now employs over 400 people. Last year's revenue crossed $60 million. Raymond Okafor attended our 10-year anniversary dinner in a custom suit. He cried during the toast. I did not cry. I had a restaurant full of people watching, and I had learned by then to save certain feelings for private hours. Patricia's chain, meanwhile, had expanded to 8 locations on the strength of my father's original reputation, then contracted back to 4 when that reputation ran out faster than her business model could sustain. Menu changes, cost cutting, health inspection issues, rumors of labor complaints from kitchen staff who said conditions had deteriorated badly. I didn't follow it closely. I had my own story to write. Then the invitation arrived, the National Hospitality Excellence Awards, both our names on the honoree list. I sat with it for a full day. Then I called James. "I'm going," I said. "I know," he said. "Bring Sophie," I added. "She's been asking to see where Mama works at fancy dinners." He packed her red dress without another word. We chose this room. We walked in with our eyes open. The first 30 minutes are navigable. We find our table. Sophie immediately begins cataloging the silverware with the focused energy of a small researcher. James orders sparkling water. I exchange greetings with people I know: Dr. Carol Simmons from the Chicago Tourism Board, Marcus Webb, the Atlanta hotel developer who has been courting a Hearthstone partnership for 8 months, Lynn Chu from Nation's Restaurant News, who covered our Nashville opening and has followed us ever since. Lynn leans close when she greets me. I saw the honoree list, she says quietly. You okay? Completely fine, I tell her, and I mean it. I am careful, deliberately positioned with my back toward the section of the room where Patricia and Derek are seated. It is a large room. There is no reason we cannot exist in it simultaneously without collision. I believe this for exactly 40 minutes. The first crack appears when the evening's program director, a cheerful man named Gerald, stops by to run through the award sequence. Hearthstone will be called to the stage third. Low Family Bistro receives the Legacy Award second. Gerald says wonderful things about both organizations in the same breath, unaware of the specific irony he is delivering. Wonderful, I say, because I have spent 15 years learning to say wonderful in a neutral voice. Sophie looks up from her fork examination. What's a legacy award, Mama? It means they've been doing something for a long time, James says carefully. Oh, Sophie considers this. Does that mean they're the best? It means they're the oldest, I say gently. Those are different things. The second crack appears 20 minutes later. I am returning from the restroom when I round a table arrangement directly into Patricia Lowe's line of movement. We stop, 3 feet apart. She looks older up close. The careful makeup doesn't quite conceal the fatigue underneath. Her dress is good, but not new. For 1 full second, neither of us speaks. Maya. Her voice has lost none of its precision. Patricia. She glances toward my table, where Sophie has apparently begun explaining something to James with considerable hand gestures. Is that your daughter? Yes. Something moves across Patricia's face. Not quite guilt, something more like recognition. The specific discomfort of seeing time rendered visible. She looks like David, Patricia says quietly. I do not respond to this. I have spent years learning which sentences deserve responses and which deserve silence. I carry my father with me every day. Patricia does not get to invoke him casually. Congratulations on your award, I say instead, and step around her. I am back at my table when Derek finds us. He has always moved through rooms like a man who is certain he is more interesting than the room deserves. He approaches with a smile that doesn't reach his jaw. Maya Chen. He says my name like a question he already knows the answer to. His gaze moves across the table. James, Sophie, back to me, with the same assessment he has carried since we were teenagers. Derek. I keep my hands relaxed on the table. Impressive what you've built? He says impressive the way some people say surprising. Must have been helpful, all those years working in Dad's restaurants. Getting that foundation early. James goes very still beside me. I have seen James go very still exactly twice before. Both times it preceded a conversation the other person did not enjoy. The foundation I got, I say quietly, was working in that kitchen for free from the age of 9. Everything after that I built without any assistance from your family. At the next table, Marcus Webb slowly sets down his drink. He is listening. He is not pretending otherwise. Derek's smile holds. I just meant the experience, the exposure. I know what you meant. Sophie looks between us with the clear, unfiltered attention of a 7-year-old who has detected that something important is happening. She sets down her fork with great care. Daddy, she says, tugging James's sleeve. Is that man Mama's brother? The table goes quiet. Derek blinks. Stepbrother, James says carefully. They grew up in the same family for a little while. Sophie absorbs this with great seriousness, turns it over. Then, with the devastating logic of a child who has not yet learned that some truths require softening, then why does he talk to Mama like she works for him? The table next to us goes silent. Marcus Webb puts down his glass entirely. Lin Chu, 2 tables away, looks up from her phone. Derek's smile finally does something honest for the first time all evening. It falls. Completely. The performance beneath it has nothing left to hold it up. He straightens his jacket, looks at me, looks at Sophie, looks at the people around us who are no longer pretending not to listen. And in his eyes, beneath everything, I see what has always lived there. The small, persistent awareness that something was taken that did not belong to them. That awareness never fully goes away. You can build a whole career on something borrowed and still carry the knowledge of the borrowing every single day. He knows. He has always known. "Congratulations on the award," he says, in a voice I have never heard from him before. Quiet, stripped of every performance he has ever worn, and he walks away. James finds my hand under the table. Later, from across the ballroom, I catch one last glimpse of Derek. Not working the room, not standing with Patricia, not performing. Just standing alone near the edge of the ballroom with a drink he isn't touching, staring at the floor. A man who has spent 15 years building an identity on a foundation he knows was borrowed. Tonight, in front of 800 people, a 7-year-old named it out loud. Some reckonings don't arrive as confrontations. They arrive as quiet moments alone at the edge of a room, with a drink you aren't touching, and a question from a child that you cannot unhear. The Legacy Award presentation is first. I watch from my seat as Patricia and Derek take the stage. Gerald reads a prepared citation about 30 years of community dining, family traditions, regional flavor. Applause fills the room. Patricia accepts the plaque with practiced grace, thanks her late husband, my father, for the foundation he built. She does not say his name. She says my late husband and moves quickly to Derek's role in carrying the vision forward. My father's name was David Chen. He built the lantern from $11,000 and a recipe his mother carried across an ocean. His name deserved to be spoken in a room that honored his work. I do not make a sound. My face does not change. But James squeezes my hand once, hard, and I am grateful for it. At the table beside us, Marcus Webb leans toward his colleague and says something I can't quite hear. His colleague nods slowly. They are both looking at the stage. Then it is our turn. Gerald calls Hearthstone Hospitality Group to the stage. I walk up. I am aware of Patricia's face in the third row. I am aware of Derek standing at the back, alone, still holding that untouched drink. I am aware of Sophie at our table, bouncing slightly in her chair. I am aware of Lin Chu with her phone angled upward. I am aware of Raymond, because Raymond is here, 3 tables from the front, in the same custom suit from our anniversary dinner, watching me with the expression of a man who made a $40,000 bet 12 years ago and would make it again without hesitation. I stand at the podium, and then, for just a moment, I forget what I planned to say. Not from fear, from something I didn't expect. The weight of the room arranging itself around this moment. Sophie's face, Patricia's face. Raymond's quiet nod from across the ballroom, the award in my hands, heavier than I anticipated. I look down at my notes. Then I fold them and set them aside. My father opened his first restaurant when I was too young to remember. I begin, and my voice comes out steadier than I feel. So I have no memory of a time before the kitchen, before the sounds and the smells and the rhythms of it. I grew up believing that cooking was a language, that feeding people well was one of the most honest things a person could do. I pause. The room is completely quiet. I was pushed out of that world when I was 19. I pause again. Not for effect, just because the sentence needs room to exist. By circumstance and by people who decided I wasn't necessary. And I want to be clear tonight. I'm not telling you that to generate sympathy. I'm telling you because the pushing out was the making of me. You cannot take someone who learned to love the kitchen from the inside and simply remove them from it. The kitchen comes with you. Someone starts clapping. Then it spreads across the room like warmth through a cold building. Hearthstone exists because I needed to cook more than I needed anyone's approval. This award belongs to every person on our team who chose craft over convenience, and to Raymond Okafor. I find his face across the room, and my voice catches, just slightly, just for a half second before I steady it. Who believed in me before the numbers did. And to my husband James, who has eaten my experimental failures for 9 years without a single complaint. Laughter moves through the room. And it belongs to my daughter Sophie, who reminded me 3 weeks ago that the whole point of food is that it makes people happy. Which is the whole thing, really. That is the entire thing. I pick up the award. I look at it for a moment. And to my father. I lift my eyes back to the room. David Chen, who built the lantern and taught me the family language before I was old enough to understand that's what it was. I say his name clearly, his full name, into the microphone, into the room of 800 people who now know it. Across the ballroom, I do not look at Patricia. Some things are not said to the people who wronged you. They are said to the room. They are said to history. They are said so that the name exists on record in a place that cannot be repainted or rebranded or quietly erased. Thank you. The applause that follows is long. Sophie, James tells me later, stood up on her chair. I find Patricia standing alone near the bar 15 minutes after the presentation. I am walking Sophie to the restroom when the path takes me past the bar, and there she is, holding a glass of white wine with both hands and looking at something I cannot see. She looks up when she hears my heels. Your father would have been proud, she says. 4 years ago, that sentence would have cracked something open in me. The grief is still there, it will always be there, but it has changed shape. Grief as foundation rather than wound. I know, I say simply. The chain is struggling. She says it without prelude. Just the fact, flat and honest in a way I have never heard from her before. 3 locations closed last year. There are labor complaints from kitchen staff, unpaid overtime, retaliation for raising concerns. I won't pretend I don't know how it happened. When you cut costs long enough, eventually you cut people. I say nothing. I know you don't owe me anything, Patricia continues, her voice stripped of its armor. I know what I did. I told myself it was business, that you were young and the company needed direction, and you would be fine. She pauses. You were fine. I was, I agree. I used your father's name to build something that wasn't as good as what he built. Her voice drops. I just wanted you to know I know that. This is not a full apology, but it is the closest thing to honesty I have ever heard from Patricia Lowe. I have learned to value honesty in whatever form it arrives. Sophie emerges from the restroom, spots me, and immediately notices Patricia. Are you the lady Mama knows? She asks. Yes. Did you used to be friends? A long beat. Something like that, Patricia says softly. Sophie nods, satisfied, and takes my hand. Mama makes really good food, she announces with absolute authority. You should try it sometime. I look down at my daughter, then back at Patricia. Good night, Patricia, I say. I walk my daughter back to the table. We left the Hargrove Hotel at 10 that night. Sophie fell asleep in the car before we reached the highway, her red dress still perfect, her small hand open in her lap like she had nothing left to hold on to and nothing left to fear. The labor complaints Patricia mentioned had already reached the Regional Labor Board 6 weeks before the award ceremony. 2 former Low Kitchen employees filed independently. Unpaid overtime, missed breaks, retaliation. The board had been building their case quietly. I did not initiate it. I did not need to. But when the investigator contacted me requesting documentation, specifically records from my father's original ownership of the lantern, I forwarded everything I had: his operational records, supplier agreements, staffing logs, the original recipe standards he had set. Nothing more, nothing less. Just the facts, offered to people whose job it was to use them. The records showed clearly what the restaurant had been under my father, and by contrast, what it had become. Patricia called once, the week the news broke. I let it go to voicemail. I listened once, saved it without responding. Derek's email arrived 3 weeks later. A proposal suggesting Hearthstone consider acquiring the remaining low locations as a heritage preservation opportunity. I forwarded it to my legal team. The numbers didn't work. We declined. What happened to their brand is not something I engineered. The collapse was already built into the foundation, in the cost cutting, the corner cutting, the borrowing of a reputation without honoring what built it. I was never the cause. I was, at most, a mirror that arrived at an inconvenient moment. Raymond visited our Columbus flagship in February, the restaurant's anniversary month. He sat at the bar and ate the braised short rib, my father's recipe, refined by 15 years of my own additions, and said nothing for a long moment after the last bite. Then, David would have changed the recipe by now. I know, I said. He loved changing recipes. He always said the point wasn't to preserve the thing. The point was to keep the thing alive. I stood behind the bar and looked at the room my father never saw. Warm light, full tables, people unhurried and well-fed, and understood something I had been circling for years without landing on. I wasn't carrying his legacy. I was carrying his instinct, the part of him that couldn't stop trying to make something better. That was enough. More than enough. The Hearthstone partnership with Keisha's nonprofit was finalized that same month. 12 apprenticeship positions in the first cohort, fully funded, with guaranteed interviews at Hearthstone Properties upon completion. Keisha called me the day the papers were signed and said simply, "We did it." "Raymond did it first," I told her. "We're just passing it forward." It is a Saturday morning in April, and Sophie is teaching herself to make dumplings. This is not going well. The pleating technique, which should produce a clean crescent fold, is producing what Sophie has cheerfully named dumpling lumps, which are structurally compromised but apparently delicious based on her enthusiastic field testing of the raw dough. "You need to pinch here and then fold," I demonstrate, hands moving through muscle memory that lives deeper than thought. "My fingers are too small," Sophie declares. "Your grandfather made these when his hands were smaller than yours." She stops, looks at her hands, then at mine. "Did he teach you?" "He did." "Will you teach me everything he taught you?" The question is simple. She is 7 and does not know the weight she has just placed in it. The years, the loss, the long rebuilding, the award plaques and investor meetings and newspaper profiles that all orbit back to this. A kitchen, 2 pairs of hands, a recipe crossing generations. "Yes," I tell her, "every single thing." James appears in the doorway with coffee and the expression he wears when he is witnessing something he wants to remember. He doesn't say anything. He leans against the frame and watches. Sophie's next dumpling is marginally better. She holds it up. "Is it good?" she asks. I turn it in my fingers. The seal is imperfect. The pleat is approximate. The dough is too thick on one side. "It's honest," I say. She beams like I have given her a star. Sophie has her dance recital this morning. The red dress is already laid out on her bed, shoes polished, hair half braided because she insisted on doing the second braid herself. James has been filming everything since breakfast, narrating quietly for the camera in a voice that is embarrassingly affectionate. I watch my daughter in the kitchen, flour on her nose, tongue out in concentration, pressing her small, determined hands into the dough. And I think about the 19-year-old who walked into November rain with nothing but a culinary school letter and 14 notebooks, and the terrifying freedom of having lost everything that could be taken. That girl could not have imagined this kitchen, this morning, this child with flour on her nose. And yet here we are. There is a photograph on the wall of every Hearthstone restaurant. Not a glossy brand image. A scanned copy of a photograph from 1987. A young man standing outside a restaurant, in front of a sign that reads, "The Lantern," squinting slightly into afternoon sunlight with both arms crossed, and the expression of someone who has just done something terrifying and is not yet sure it was smart. My father, 26 years old, $11,000, and a recipe. Guests rarely ask about it. When they do, the staff says, "That's the founder's father. The kitchen is built on what he started, not in spite of what happened to her, not after everything she overcame. Just, the kitchen is built on what he started, because that is the true story. Not the wound, not the injustice, not the long, cold years rebuilding. Those things happened and shaped me, and I do not pretend otherwise. But the foundation was never Patricia's betrayal. The foundation was a man who believed food was a language, who put his whole life into feeding people well, who raised a daughter inside that belief before he got the chance to see what she would do with it. Sophie finishes her last dumpling and holds it up. Genuinely, honestly, technically imperfect in every dimension. She is so proud of it. "Table," she announces, carrying her plate with both hands and maximum ceremony. James and I follow her to the kitchen table. Not the restaurant, not the ballroom, not the stage. Just the table we eat at every morning, with the window that lets in good light, and the chairs that don't quite match, and the small vase of whatever Sophie picked from the garden placed exactly in the center. She sets her dumplings down like she is unveiling something important. And she is. She absolutely is. "Okay," she says, sitting down and picking up her fork with great seriousness. "The important thing about food is that it makes people happy. Mama said so." James looks at me. I look at my daughter. Outside, the morning is doing what mornings do. Light moving slowly across the floor, the city waking up, ordinary life arranging itself around ordinary moments that are, when you look clearly, the whole point. My father built a restaurant from $11,000 and a recipe. I built 11 cities from the memory of his kitchen. Sophie is building her own foundation out of dumpling lumps and red dresses and the absolute certainty that food makes people happy. Every generation gets to add a chapter. "That's exactly right," I say. We eat. If this story stayed with you, if you found yourself thinking about someone who underestimated you, someone who took something that wasn't theirs, or someone who believed in you before the world did, then you already know why I had to tell it. Stories like this one don't go viral because they're dramatic. They go viral because they're true. Not just for one person, for millions of people sitting alone somewhere, rebuilding something, refusing to disappear. If that's you, this one was for you. If this story moved you even 1%, do one thing before you leave. Hit the like button right now. It takes 2 seconds, and it tells the algorithm that stories like this one deserve to be seen by more people who need them. Every single like is a vote for honest storytelling over noise. And if you know someone, a friend, a sibling, anyone who is in the middle of their rebuilding years right now, who feels invisible or discarded or underestimated, share this with them today, not tomorrow. Today. Sometimes the right story at the right moment changes everything. Subscribe if you want more, not for numbers, because every week I bring you a story built the same way this one was: specific, honest, human, and real. No shortcuts, no cheap emotion, just the kind of storytelling that stays with you after you close the tab. Hit the bell notification so you never miss one. I will see you in the next story. And remember, the people who pushed you out of the room never imagined you would come back and own the building. Keep going.